I suggest that you begin this process of realization by visualizing the presence you seek. Create an inner picture of yourself receiving divine guidance and banish all doubts about its validity. You will find that your picture dissolves into the reality of a presence that is accessible within yourself. This is realization. It is a personal experience beyond anything related to an intellectual exercise. With practice and desire and quiet meditation, you will experience this presence. The third step, reverence, is acquired quickly by some people, while for others it can take a long time. Communing quietly with the spiritual force and becoming one with it means there is no sense of separation. In other words, we begin to see ourselves as a part of God. We are in a state of reverence for all that we are.
Boo!
There is a spiritual solution to every problem.
Let that run.
I believe the definitions I use for spiritual, problem, and solution can form the basis for a unique way of bringing peace and fulfillment into your daily life. It is my contention that once you internalize these concepts, you will rarely revert to the belief that you face insurmountable problems. I think it is important to see spiritual as a part of physical rather than separate these two dimensions of our reality. It is all one.
Again, seriously.
Spirit represents that which we cannot validate with our senses. The real key to understanding spiritual is this idea of our inner world and our outer world.
Hey!
One
Down!
life, yet two unique aspects of being human. I have a friend who compares the physical to a light bulb and the spiritual to electricity. When I refer to spiritual, I do not intend it to be synonymous with religious. Religion is orthodoxy, rules, and historical scriptures maintained by people over long periods of time. Generally, people are born into religions and raised to obey the customs and practices of that religion without question. These are customs and expectations from outside of the person and do not fit my definition of spiritual. Spirituality is from within. My personal understanding of spiritual practice is that it is a way of making my life work at a higher level and of receiving guidance. The ways in which I do this involve a few simple but basic practices. I have enumerated them here in my own order of significance. Surrender. This is first because it is the most crucial and often the most difficult. In order to surrender, you must be able to admit to being helpless. In surrender, my thoughts are something like this. I simply do not know how to resolve this situation. And I'm turning it over to the same force that I turn my physical body over to every night when I go to sleep. I'm willing to turn any problem over to this invisible force, which is my source, while keeping in mind that I am connected at all times to that source. In other words, the spiritual life is a way of walking with God instead of walking alone. Love. Activating spiritual solutions means converting inner thoughts and feelings from disharmony to love. I use a metaphor of a long cord that is hanging from my hip, and I have the option of plugging that cord into one of two sockets. When I plug into the material world socket, I receive the illusions of disharmony. I feel out of sorts, hurt, upset, anguished, and hopeless in terms of being able to solve or correct my problem. When I am plugged in this way, I struggle to attain false powers. Defining empowerment only in material world terms is a reflection of being spiritually disconnected. When I imagine this cord being yanked from the material world socket and replugged into the spiritual socket, I immediately experience a sense of peace and relief. I can relax and remember that the Spirit is God, which is synonymous with love. Love and love alone dissolves all negativity, much as light dissolves darkness by just its mere presence. The infinite. Awareness of our infinite nature is terrific for putting everything into perspective. When I unplug myself from the material and replug myself into the spiritual, I immediately let go of fear, judgment, and negativity. Infinite love is what I receive from that new energy source. An empty mind. I feel strongly about the need for meditation to nourish the soul and access divine assistance. Beyond the actual act of meditation is a willingness to empty my mind of my agenda and be open to what will inevitably come to me. I relinquish my thoughts to the power that Spirit has to make things work. Completely emptying the mind of our agenda leads to forgiveness. Getting to a state of emptiness means ridding ourselves of all blame and all angry thoughts about what has transpired in the past. There is no room for hanging on to who did what and when and how wrong they were. Generosity and gratefulness. Sometimes I feel the necessity to remind myself that we come into this world with nothing, and we will exit the same way. So finding a spiritual solution involves doing the only thing I can do with my life. That is, giving it away and being simultaneously grateful for the opportunity to do so. Here's a formula which works for me. I get back from the world precisely what I put out to the world, which is another way of stating the proverb, as you sow, so shall you reap. I recommend your spiritual practice involves being generous and grateful with your thoughts. The more you send out thoughts of how may I serve, rather than what's in it for me, the more you will hear back, how may I serve you? Connectedness. The Sufi poet Rumi once explained that the terms I, you, me, he, she, and they are distinctions that cannot be made in the garden of the mystics. In spiritual consciousness, you view yourself as a flower in this garden, and everyone else in the garden connected to you in an invisible way. Our difficulties are something we realize that we share with everyone else. Nurture your sense of connection to everyone, and God as well. This allows you to remove your ego from conflicts. This awareness of being a part of everyone allows you to suspend anger toward others and to see them as partners in the resolution of all problems. Know that there are people to whom you are connected who are available to help you find the right job, to solve a puzzling issue that seems irreconcilable, to help you back on your feet, to resolve financial difficulties. Everyone becomes a compatriot rather than a competitor. This is spiritual awareness as I practice it. I try to remind myself in moments of despair of the beautiful affirmation from A Course in Miracles. I can choose peace rather than this. Trust me, it works. And finally, cheerfulness.
How was that?
Appearances, there is something noticeable about people who have reached a high level of spiritual awareness. They seem to be in a constant state of bliss. Ask yourself this key question. How do I feel most of the time? If your answer is that you feel anxious, anguished, hurt, depressed, frustrated, and so on, then you have a spiritual disconnect. This could mean you have allowed your personal energy field to become contaminated by the debilitating forces of those in your immediate life space. I often ask myself, how am I truly feeling inside myself these days? If my answer is not so hot or upset, I meditate and go to the quiet place where I can plug my cord into the spiritual outlet. A state of cheerfulness returns almost instantaneously. Every teacher who has been significant in my life.
No. Come on, wait. Hi, baby.
Only you can depict yourself in paradise. That concludes the components of the word spiritual. Now let's take a look at what I mean by the word problem. In my heart, I feel that there is really only one problem for any of us. That is, when we allow ourselves to separate from God. But in a very real sense, we can never be separate from God. Yet, we often still believe that we have problems. The problems of disease, discord, fear, anxiety, scarcity, disappointments, and others, and so on, are all in our minds. When we truly reconnect to our source, these feelings disappear. I use the word problem as if it truly exists, yet I know every time I use it that it's an illusion. So every time you hear the word, know that I perceive it as an illusion created by ourselves because we have separated ourselves from God. There's a powerful line in A Course in Miracles which reminds me of this lesson. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. We can learn to view every crisis as an opportunity, which wouldn't necessarily make life easier, but would make it more satisfying.
What are you looking at?
You would never be able to view anything as a negative occurrence because we'd see everything as useful. Our conditioning is so strong that we often have far greater faith in our problems than we do in our ability to no longer have them. We often display a much greater faith in the power of cancer or AIDS than we do in the power to heal them. The evil, the pain, the anguish are of our own creation, and they represent opportunities to gain
Hello.
greater learning.
You're fine.
I ask you to keep an open mind as we travel this path of healing, to bring peace back into your life. On a